I cannot wait for this interview. Her name is Emma Hepburn, Dr. Emma, and she is the psychology mum. I don't know if you follow her. If not, please do follow her, because she has this, well, firstly, she's our first doctor. She understands the brain, and she also has an amazing way of illustrating all these fantastic things that we talk about, and yet she has just this way. Go and check her out. It's absolutely fantastic. She has this brain called Brian, and she actually makes the brain do things in her illustrations and tackles things like the imposter syndrome, tackles things about guilt, tackles things about, putting on your best show of yourself and really what's happening underneath. And I cannot wait to talk to her. She's a clinical psychologist. She's a mum of two, and she works at the Aberdeen Royal Infirmary and is also a lecturer at the Aberdeen University. So we've got someone super smart here to talk to us. I'm wondering if she can help me when you've got too much on the brain. You've got too many compartments open, too many tabs open. And I'm so looking forward to talking to her.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, Holly.
How are you?
I'm good. And you see Brian in the background here. He's very happy that you mentioned him.
Oh, Brian.
Here's the real life Brian the brain.
Oh, my goodness.
Away there. Quite happy that you mentioned him in the introduction too. So,
well, it's so nice to have you here. And as I said to the community, you're our first doctor. We've had some sirs, we've had a knight, but we have not had a doctor. And so it's wonderful to have you on.
I am honoured. Thank you for inviting me on.
Well, you know what? I want to just jump in because if that's okay with you, because I've got so many questions, and I know that you are you're within the NHS daily, and you are an author and you're an illustrator. You've got so many strings to your bow. I wanted to understand, how did you find yourself, before we get into some of the questions that might come through, how did you find yourself in this line of work within psychology, but then also sort of, you've obviously got this artistic side of you. Were you always the two things combined when you were younger?
Yeah, I think I didn't decide I wanted to go into psychology straight away. I actually always thought I'd go into something artistic. And actually I started studying architecture when I was 18.
Oh, right.
So it was the first thing I went into. And then various things, just life events happened, and I stopped doing architecture, took a year out. And I thought, well, what am I really interested in? I'm really interested in how people function. I love people watching. I love sitting watching people in a cafe. So what am I really interested in? I'm interested in people. I'm interested in how they function. I'm interested in brains. So psychology seemed like the right option for me. And if I'm honest, I did feel my creative side was put aside for a long time in psychology. At an undergraduate level, I don't think, certainly my degree wasn't very creative. But when I became a clinical psychologist, I started working with children initially. And to be a psychologist with children, you have to be very, very creative. You have to do things that engage them, that make these, what could be boring or hard to speak about psychological concepts, understandable and fun. So it was very creative, sitting on the floor, drawing things, making things meaningful, making models with them. So I started to discover that actually psychology is very creative. And I also did it with adults. So I've always drawn in my sessions with adults. A lot of psychologists do. We draw out models, we draw out concepts. So I've always drawn with adults as well. So we'll be talking about something. I'll say, well, this sounds like this, and I'll draw it all together, and I'll give them away a scrappy bit of paper, but they, with something on it, which they then use throughout the week. So I discovered psychology is actually very creative. And then, so it's been a very kind of organic process to get to where I am today. I then bought a fancy iPad. It was a treat to myself for a birthday 2 years ago. And I started thinking I could draw these things I draw with patients or with the people I work with, and make them kind of take them beyond the clinic room, because the same things come up again and again. We're so, we have so much in common as people that I thought these can be helpful to more people. So I started drawing them on this fancy iPad and getting more creative, and really enjoyed it. It's my hobby. Started putting them up, and people found them helpful. People really engage with them. So that's kind of what took me to where I am today.
What took you to, and then you launched the psychology, you launched the Psychology Mum on Instagram, and I'm saying to everybody to make sure that they follow you, because it is absolutely a joy. I mean, once you start looking at the illustrations, you just cannot stop. And you know, Brian the Brain is there, and he, you know, it is absolutely genius. So before we talk about the book, because I would love to know how that all happened, I wanted to ask you, you know, right and left side of the brain. Now I know it doesn't really exist, and we have everything, but the concept of it. Do you think that that is something that I always love the idea of the power of the left and the right side of the brain, the sort of exactly what you've just said, psychology, but using creativity. And this obviously is so prevalent in your work. Do you think that this is something that, and I'm just interested because this whole because we're talking about brains, this whole right and left side of the brain, so many people here listening to this are creative. And so they always say this thing, which is, you know, so I'm not very good at the numbers, or I'm not very good at, you know, I'm just creative, or, you know, I'm just a creative person. Why do we do that? Because I'm just interested, because one of my things, you might know, is to try and get everybody to feel confident that they have both sides. Maybe one side is stronger than the other, but is it something that people can just sort of say that they're creative, so the other things don't really work for them?
I think that's an excellent question. I think that's not so much about how our brains work, but the narratives we tell ourselves about ourselves. And we can become quite defined by our narratives. So, for example, you know, I went to psychology and I kind of lost the fact I was a creative person. I did for many years. I didn't think I was creative. I didn't think I could do that anymore because I was doing psychology. And then when I started drawing again, I discovered, oh, actually, I am still creative. I was when I was 18. I still am now. But I was quite uncertain about that because I hadn't done it for a long time. So I think that's becoming more confined by what we think we are. And we become a bit anxious about the things we don't think we're so good at. But we can do them. It's just that we don't think we can do them. And it creates discomfort to do them in the first place. So when I started drawing, I thought, oh, can I do this? Oh, what will people think? You know, is this terrible? All those things, because I hadn't done it for a long time. But then obviously I gradually got more used to it, the discomfort lessened. So my story then became, I'm a clinical psychologist that is creative.
Right. So it's what we tell ourselves. And I suppose if you just keep telling yourself something over and over and over again, that's what you believe.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, we're hearing it first, community. It has got nothing, even though we talk about our right and left side of the brain, it's got nothing to do with the brain. So, you know, some of us don't have something that someone else doesn't have. We've all got the same equipment.
Yeah.
We've just got to use it and tell ourselves the right thing. So your new book focuses on dealing with your inner critic, and the feeling, the emotion of being overwhelmed. And my book is on its way. And I wanted to have it here, but I think it's just arrived at home, and I've decided to work in the office today. And I know that, you know, these are two emotions definitely that I understand. Well, I don't understand them, but they've been around me. And I'm sure that this community, you know, that inner critic, we're all so ready to criticize ourselves and not love ourselves. And the imposter syndrome, it sort of feeds off these things, doesn't it? That's it's sort of, it's food, it's energy. And this imposter syndrome affects women, and it's something that we talk about. And, you know, you wish that there's sort of these words and these things that we don't have to talk about. But can you just tell us, are there some strategies that we, for anyone that does suffer from the imposter syndrome, can help us sort of overcome these traits?
Yes, I think that's so common, isn't it? Imposter syndrome. I think we've all experienced it. And I think what's really important to remember is it's not just you. It's not just anybody listening. It's also me. It's also you, Holly. I'm sure you've experienced it at some point.
Absolutely. At some point this morning. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I experienced it at some point this morning doing my first Instagram Live. It's so common. You know, what do I have to speak about? Oh, you know, we all have those feelings. So that's the first thing. Just because you feel uncertain doesn't mean you're incompetent. If you're doing something new, like for example, me today, I've never done an Instagram live today. I felt some discomfort about it. I was looking forward to it, but I also worried about setting it up and what might happen. So I felt a level of discomfort. Does that mean I'm incompetent? No. But what we think when we go into a meeting or when we go into sell our stuff and we feel discomfort is that actually means we're incompetent. But it doesn't. Discomfort and self-doubt is totally normal. It's absolutely normal. Right. We all feel it. And it's keeping a track on it and making sure it doesn't overwhelm us. And in fact, some ways discomfort is helpful because it means we keep a check on ourselves. But it's keeping that in balance. It's making sure the self-doubt is helpful and not unhelpful. And I think when we feel discomfort or emotions we think we shouldn't be feeling, we tend to become a bit ashamed of them and tuck them under. And we think it's just us and we're something different and we shouldn't be feeling this way. But just like we've spoken about, as soon as you start opening up those emotions, it reduces the shame and you start to think, oh, okay, everybody feels this way to some extent. It's not just me. It's not just because I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Actually, everybody has that to some extent. So it's kind of open up about those can be really, really helpful. And like you talked about with your inner critic as well, your inner critic feeds on this. It loves when you feel self-doubt. It's a point for it to come in and go, haha, I'm going to come and get you now. I'm going to tell you all the things that are wrong about you. But if we notice that, if we notice our inner critic coming in, and something I quite like to do with people is saying, what would your inner critic look like? Can you envisage it? Can you tell me what your inner critic is like? And I've got a brilliant series of pictures that ideas people gave me on my Instagram of inner critics, and they range from little sly foxes to a little critical louse. They were absolutely brilliant when people told me what they looked like. And you start to externalize it from you. So that's what your inner critic's saying to you. And as soon as you've externalized it, you can say, okay, now I'm saying that to myself. If I was saying, so if Holly, if you told me what your critic was saying to you, what would I say to you? That's a much fairer response because we're so subjective with ourselves. So what would I say to a friend if they were experiencing this inner critic? How would I deal with it? How can I step back and look at it much more objectively from a kind of wider stance, rather than being totally involved and thinking my inner critic is true? It's not true. It's just somebody, it jumps in and feeds on self-doubt and tells you those things to try and increase that self-doubt and make you feel worse. So hopefully that's some techniques that people could use to help with their inner critic. And I think externalize it from yourself and visualizing it as something else can be really, really helpful too.
And I think you're so right there, but there's a difference, isn't there? Because sometimes when I talk about the imposter syndrome, the imposter syndrome, let's say when I'm dyslexic. So 4 years ago when I wrote my first post, and I would send it around to everybody asking for their advice, and then I would post it. And over the years, and I don't know how many posts I've done, but literally something like 52 books worth or something ridiculous I write every day. That imposter syndrome in a way fueled better behavior from myself. I was checking it, I was nervous, I wasn't too overconfident, etc. It's when it tips that balance, doesn't it, where it starts to overwhelm you. Absolutely. And if you haven't got confidence and you don't know that it's a horrible, ugly monster coming to get you, and you haven't done that visualization, would you say that is the time where you put your hand up and maybe go and ask for some help? Because I think that's the thing that us women need to really train ourselves in, which is, do we live with the imposter syndrome and not sort of tackling it for the rest of our lives? Or can we, maybe upon hearing this, say, actually, here's a problem for me. I do need to go and get some help. I need to visualize what it is, and I need to get it in check so that in 10 years' time, I'm not saying the same thing.
I think that's an excellent point. So it's knowing when, like you say, self-doubt can be helpful, and imposter syndrome can be helpful. And what you did there is you sought support to get a second bit of advice, get some, you had that network around about you, which kind of shored you up and helped manage that. And I think that's so important, having mentors, having people you share with, so important to make sure that self-doubt or the imposter syndrome doesn't become crippling. But given what's going on in your life, it can happen to just about anybody. So it's important to know what the signs are for you. And there's a really good section in my book which looks at what are the signs that your mental health or your mind is starting to suffer. And it's when that overwhelm or that crippling imposter syndrome becomes too much and stops you doing things. Because if it helps you to think about how you do it, that's good. But if it stops you doing it, that's unhelpful. And certainly there's lots of help you can get around about that as well. It's recognising what your signs are that you need that additional input. Because we all need help at times. Nobody is an island that stands by themselves. And it's okay to get help. And I really want to normalise that getting input when you're feeling bad is normal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's normal. And it's, you know, and I was just talking to Harry about it. I'm going to ask some questions, but, you know, I do think that it is a wonderful thing that's now happening, which is our young more and more are recognizing it's more normal to ask for help than, let's say, when I was growing up. You know, it still had some stigma attached to it. Now, I want to ask you, I've got a few questions here. A couple of comments to start with. Ben's Basil, I think a lot of people suffer self-doubt because of mistakes they have made in the past. Remember, making mistakes is the only way to learn. So I think that's a good point.
Absolutely brilliant. Can I just comment on that, Holly? Because I have a whole chapter in my books about mistakes. How it starts is saying our brain actually learns by making errors. It makes prediction errors to learn that something it predicted was wrong, to learn something new. So we need to make mistakes. It's really important, and it's how we respond to those mistakes that's important. So thank you. I think it was Ben. That's a really good comment.
Yeah, it's fantastic comment. The Mindful Mum, we love Psychology Mum Insta accounts, and Sunflower SPC, watching by the pool right now. Oh my goodness, yes. I'm very jealous of anyone who's away at the moment. I think holidays have become this sort of, you know, if we used to love the pictures of the seaside and the sea and sand, now we're all addicted, I think, to them. The Thoughtful Potter has a question. I'd like to know tips dealing with stuff that happened in my childhood that is still affecting me now. How do you let go of the past? My goodness, Deborah, what a lovely question, and a very vulnerable question. And I certainly have had personal experience, not myself, but those very close to me who also have allowed the past to really infiltrate their worlds. What advice would you have there?
I think that's a very, very helpful question, a really insightful question, because we are effectively our story, aren't we? We build up our story from where we've been, what we've been experienced, and you know, we build up who we are as a person from that. So our past is inherently part of us right now. Our brain, the only thing it knows is our past experience to predict the future. So it's so important. And I think it's not a question I can answer in 2 minutes, because it is about breaking down kind of how your understanding of the past, how you look at that, how it's become part of your story now, and how that story, and that might affect your beliefs about yourself, it might affect your beliefs about other people, or it might affect your beliefs about the world, and how those beliefs and those that you've built up because of your story are still impacting on how you interact with the world and stopping you from doing what you want to do. Now, sometimes you can do that yourself, but sometimes you do need an additional bit of help to that, because sometimes having somebody to step outside your story, which you're so subjectively and emotionally involved in, it can be really helpful just to put that in place and start to look at it from a different perspective. So you might be able to deal with that yourself. So thank you for the brilliant question. But again, it's something as psychologists we look at how does your past story affect your current story and what you're predicting about the future.
Yeah, what a great piece of advice there. And for anyone watching now, we're going to talk about the titles, and we're going to story it and everything. But Emma's book is A Toolkit for Modern Life. 53 ways to look. Here it is. 53 ways to look after your mind. And I've got mine coming along. I cannot wait to read it. And I advise everybody to go and get it. We've got another question for you, Emma. Miss Magpie Wildlife Art. I really struggle with the very common imposter syndrome on a daily basis, both in my business, which I run in my spare time, and in my full-time job. How can I just believe in myself more?
Yeah, great question. Thank you very much. And again, I think coming back to the fact you're obviously feeling discomfort doing things, or self-doubt doing things, recognizing that feeling and separating yourself from that feeling. So don't conflate that feeling of feeling uncertain or feeling doubtful as incompetence. We're very bad at doing that. We think that because we're feeling difficult or because we're feeling uncertain, it means we're incompetent. It doesn't mean that. So step back from the feeling, recognize the feeling, allow the feeling to be there, but don't define yourself by that feeling. And then I think step back further. Step back and think, what would I talked about looking at it from a different perspective, a wider perspective. What would I say to somebody else in that situation? Is such a helpful thing to do, because you gain a more objective perspective and you separate how you're reacting to it from those feelings. So I think stepping back from it again is really, really helpful, because as soon as we're defined by the feelings and we get pushed along by those feelings, it might stop us doing things. But another thing, if we try and push those feelings away, the biggest irony is they jump back more if we say, I shouldn't be feeling this way. So if you say to yourself, oh, I'm going to a meeting, I'm coming to this Instagram late, I shouldn't be feeling a little bit anxious about it. Why am I feeling anxious about it? One idiot feeling anxious about it. The irony is, all the research shows us that makes our brain more stressed. So it
right.
Yes, it's so as soon as we tuck it under, the feelings fight back more. Our stress systems get going, or we get more anxious. So saying, okay, feeling, I know you're there. I know I feel discomfort. I know I feel awkward. I know I felt slightly anxious about this morning. That's okay. It's perfectly normal to feel that, but you're not defined by that, and you can choose to step back from that feeling and respond in a different way. So it's so important to recognize and not be defined by the feeling.
Oh, it's such a good answer. And it makes me think about, and I'm going to get this wrong, but not wrong, but I'm going to say it in not a way that you would say it. But, I loved realizing and understanding that feelings are exactly that. They're just a feeling. They're not real. So, I know that sounds very obvious to everyone listening, but when you really think about that, everything that you feel is not real. It's only real when you action or say something or do something. And so that's where I think that notion of, think before you speak and all of those things, because a feeling that you have or someone makes you feel isn't necessary, it's not true. It's just that. It's a connection of the brain. It's your body working and you're feeling something. And I think that that's a really interesting thing, because the amount of people, all of us, me, everyone, we act on a feeling. Feeling becomes fact, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's so interesting, because as soon as you start to say to people, what are emotions, you will struggle. I'm writing a lecture series at the moment, and one of the things I ask is, what are emotions? And you have no idea the different responses we get. We really struggle to define it. But ultimately, what are feelings? You've just said it. It's sensations in our body. It's a physiological response. And the emotions are the concept we use to describe that. But we can navigate that differently. We don't need to be defined and respond to those emotions. As soon as we step back and say, okay, my body is feeling this, or I feel like and we define the emotion. And actually a really other interesting piece of research, which I love, is the more we're able to describe how we're feeling, the finer our words are, it's called granulation of emotions, the better we are at responding to our feelings. If we just say, I feel bad, then we're more likely to say more stressed. But if we say, I'm feeling really quite anxious today because I've got Instagram Live with Holly. I'm also feeling quite excited, but it's normal. I've never done an Instagram Live before. I feel a little bit nervous that maybe I might muck up my words. I might do this. Then actually that helps us deal with the feeling more, because I've really defined what's going on.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes when I've had some help in my life, I remember, and it's the same, my therapist would talk about describing the feelings, even the way that it sounds, what color, what do I feel about it, what part of my body is feeling this emotion, and actually really getting into it. And it's a fascinating exercise. I've got so many comments coming through, I've got to read them out. How fine designs, mentors are the best thing. It helps you to realize how much you can do. Mistakes just mean you're making progress.
Love that. And I think mentors are amazing, because we've got our own brain space, but we're confined. Our brain is confined to our own skull and our past experience and everything we've done it with it. As soon as you have a mentor, you've got somebody else's brain space to look at you. Wonderful. I love mentors.
Yeah. And also, guys, if you can't get a mentor, community, join the Holly & Co Facebook group, join communities. It's an amazing thing to have lots of, as you said, lots of Brian the Brains. Future little thinks. Fascinating, and certainly going to start following you, Dr. Emma. There we are. Along dusty roads, Emma has such a refreshing approach and perspective, essential for learning how to deal with what the modern digital world throws at us.
Thank you, Andrew.
We've got we've got the Thoughtful Potter. Thanks, ladies. I'm definitely going to buy the book. Oh, I'm really glad, Deborah, that helped. Salma Iqbal. What a great conversation! What a great conversation! Oh, as a fellow clinical psychologist, feeling inspired by you, Emma, promoting mental health promoting mental health so helpfully. Great work, and excited to order your book. Miss Magpie Wildlife Art, thank you, Emma. That's so helpful. I'm terrible at listening to the advice I give my loved ones when they feel a similar way. So that's something I need to work on. And it's true, isn't it? We help everyone else, don't we? And then we don't actually listen to the advice ourselves.
Can I tell Miss Magpie a little secret that I shouldn't probably share, but I'm going to anyway? We're all terrible at putting theory into practice. I know so much psychological theory. Does it stop me getting stressed? Not always, because I'm human. We're all human. But having theory or knowing the theory and being able to give it to somebody else is very different from being able to do it yourself. So even psychologists get stressed, even psychologists get down. We all do. It's just perfectly normal. But then we need to step back and think what really helpful you can do to other people. That's a huge bonus, because you can then step back and say, what would I say to somebody else, and how can I use that myself?
We've got a question from Lillian May Studio. I feel like I am somehow scared of success and tend to self-sabotage. Is there any advice to get through that?
I think that's so common. We often predict that things are going to go wrong. So we become scared when things go right because they're then going to go wrong.
Yes.
So
you don't
common.
Deserve, do you?
Yes.
Lillian, you probably feel the same. And maybe Dr. Emma, you're going to tell us that this is what everyone feels. But I sometimes get to a point, because I'm a very optimistic person, that if I'm believing too much in something fantastic, is someone going to take it away from me? I need to prepare to be, flat on the floor. I need to prepare for that. And is there any truth in any of this?
You have just hit the nail on the head. Part of what you're describing, what was described previously, is almost a kind of preparation for feeling bad. We like to make ourselves, I don't want to feel too good in case it turns out bad. I need to prepare myself for feeling bad. But the thing is, preparing yourself is actually not going to make that bad experience any better. So you might as well enjoy it when it's good, because it might go bad, but you've got it good right now, so you might as well enjoy it when it's good, because the preparation, I guess there are instances of say, don't get your hopes too high. It's kind of, protecting yourself. But if things are going well right now, so for example, my book is obviously coming out Thursday. There's a sense of, what if? You still have that, but you can keep that.
Yeah.
However, I'm having, there's lots of exciting things going on right now. Those two feelings aren't mutually exclusive. I'm going to shift my attention. It's all about attention. Where am I going to shift my attention to? I'm not going to disregard the fact there's some anxieties there. I'm going to shift my attention from them to say, I'm going to enjoy this experience as much as possible. I'm going to focus on the here and now and keep my attention as much as possible in the here and now.
And do you think, so when Lillian was talking about sabotaging, in a way, what we could say is, because I do believe that, I always say, think about the worst thing that can happen and almost make friends with it, because then that scary nightmare, there's nothing worse than having the, rug pulled under your feet or something. Yes. So in a way you could say, let's think of the absolute worst thing that's going to happen here. Yes. So for you on Instagram Live, it's going to be that we're going to have technical gremlins come along and this is all going to go, south. If you deal with that, make friends with it, understand it, and what you're then saying is put it aside so that you've been there and now focus all your attention on the good stuff. Because, and tell me, just so that we know this, by you focusing your mind on the positive side of this all, there is nothing, is there, that slightly jinx anything, is there? There's no scientific facts that if we are positive, it means that we are storing up all the negative to come and bite us on the arse.
I will disregard us that. Absolutely no way.
Okay. So by us thinking positively and by us being confident,
yeah.
That means that it doesn't mean that we are banking all the bad stuff and it's going to be even worse.
Absolutely not. Life will happen anyway, and bad things will happen. And it's not about, we all have bad things happen in our life. We can't stop them happening. But what people predict is usually people predict it's going to be worse than it actually is. We predict the negative. It's just natural. Our brains respond more to negative things. We also underestimate how much we will be able to deal with them. We think it's going to be terrible because we won't be able to cope with it. But most people actually cope with it really well. And many people come out of adversity saying it was a positive, or saying it was a helpful experience for them.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, COVID's turned everything, hasn't it, that we know upside down. And Wilfred Emmanuel Jones, someone who I quote quite often, he mentioned, and he's so eloquent. He talked about how society, we crave certainty. And this entire time has been one of the most uncertain times. And then, you know, every day you turn on the news, someone could be just literally changing your life around. I'm getting married on Friday. My plans had to be changed a week before my wedding. And I'm saying to people, you know, in normal days, you know, that would have been a really big deal. But slightly right now, you've just got to roll with everything and roll with uncertainty. Can you just tell us what tools might we put in place to be more comfortable with uncertainty just generally?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, because our brains don't like uncertainty. We like as humans to predict what's going to happen. And if there is uncertainty, we fill those gaps, usually with incorrect knowledge or fears or worries. So the first thing is, keep an eye for what you're filling those gaps with. Are you filling them with catastrophizing, predicting the worst case scenario, which is what we often do, it's going to be terrible? Or actually, if these things do happen, will you be able to manage them and find a way around them? Probably the latter. So it's watch what you're filling those gaps with. Secondly, fill those gaps with as much facts as possible. You know, fill it with people who, you know, what will happen if things do go wrong, or if your wedding's going to be cancelled, what can you do? How can you do it? Fill it with the facts, not the fears. That's really important. And the other thing is, what can you control today? So we're all living with uncertainty right now. What can we do right now? So today, I know I can do X, Y, Z. Tomorrow is uncertain anyway. We just don't think it is. We're just more aware that it's uncertain now. We like to think the world's predictable because our brains love that. So what can I do in the here and now? What's the next steps I can take? Even if things are going wrong, we can't work on 5 weeks in the future right now at all. We can work on today. So what's in your control today? What can you do now? There's a really nice exercise in the book, actually, which is balloons floating away, which are things we put out of our control, and ones we're holding on to, which are things in our control that we can deal with right now.
Oh, I love that. I love that. God, I love that idea. We've got another question. Store for the mind. I'd like some tips for building resilience. My 8-year-old wonder boy has autism and ADHD and daily meltdowns. It is tough on his brothers, and I sometimes struggle to keep upbeat. I mean, you know, this is an amazing woman and she's just incredible, and she has an amazing business. But talk about resilience and how, what can we do when we're the Duracell batteries of our businesses and our homes and our children's lives? How do we restore that resilience?
I think resilience is a really interesting concept, because often we use resilience to mean we shouldn't be feeling a particular way in response to a particular situation. But that's not what resilience is. Resilience is being able to deal with difficult things. And as soon as we say we shouldn't be feeling a certain way, it becomes unhelpful for us and our brains. Yeah. So the first thing is, it's okay to feel rubbish in response to a stressful situation. Recognising it is stressful and how you feel is absolutely okay in response to that. It's normal to feel difficult emotions to respond to a difficult event. So resilience is not having to feel good all the time, because that's impossible. Resilience is responding to bad things when they do happen and being able to recognise and manage those feelings when they do happen. Part of resilience as well is also recognising it's not coping by yourself, because that's not also a bit of a myth. Resilience is coping by myself all the time. Resilience is also recognising when you need help, because that's being resilient too. Resilience is being able to deal with the situation the best you can. And often that's needing help round about it. But one way I think about building up resilience, that's an excellent question again, it's not something I can answer that full thing in response to here, but it's recognizing how you're feeling. And you talked about right at the start, Holly, just as I was about to come in about feeling overwhelmed, is recognizing where you are. I've got what I call the capacity cup in the book, which is recognizing where your levels of overwhelm or stress are. And often we respond reactively to stressors rather than proactively. So for example, this week, I knew I was going to have a busy week. I knew I was going to be right at the top of that cup. I knew I was at huge risk of overflowing and going cremola foam style over my capacity cup. So I took 2 weeks off my NHS job because I proactively predicted it was going to be like that. And I'm so glad I did. And I've been very bad at doing it historically, is proactively planning for stress. So not everything can be planned for, but it's about recognizing what can be planned for and also allowing yourself to reduce your capacity by maybe chucking things out of your cup or getting help from people if you can. So I think that model of where is my overwhelm level and what can I do about it can be really, really helpful in building resilience.
Yeah, preparing. And I suppose as we get older, you know, maybe, and I hope so for the, you know, that's answering you the question, but it's preparing for those points, isn't it? It's and maybe if we look also, so one, preparing. So you predicted your stress and that cup, and you actually you actually looked at your diary literally for stress levels. And I don't do that, so that's a really good tip. Secondly, when we think about store for the mind and the question there, when she basically is finding it hard to cope, you know, when you basically, so you haven't prepared, okay, and it's happening.
I've always, yeah,
and it's actually happening. What are some tips that you can do to manage that moment? You know, when you know, I've got, you know, lots of people when their business is, you know, shutting the doors of their business, or they're brand new mothers, or all these sorts of things, or they are dealing with impossible situations. What do we do? What's that thing that we can do to potentially just save ourselves?
I think, great question. So many stresses at the moment and so many things that we can all be stressed about. We can't always plan and predict. So again, I think it's stepping back, recognizing again, it comes back to feelings, isn't it? How are you feeling? Recognizing how you're feeling and recognizing when you are tipping over into maybe overwhelm or not coping. In the here and now, it's about bringing that feeling, bring that stress down. So that might be breathing, that might be just taking a step outside for a moment so you're not responding because of the stress. You can do slow breathing. There's really nice techniques you can do to just actually bring your body's stress levels down. So what's called your sympathetic nervous system is going down, and your parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest, is coming in instead, which can help you think clearly again. So it's very much in the moment. And I think in the longer term, breaking down, if you've got all these things in your cup, what is it that's causing the stress? What's in there? Because when we're stressed, we feel overwhelmed. Our brains just basically go into kind of like overwhelmed zone, or the overriding. They're just stressed all the time. They can't think clearly, they can't break it down. Everything just seems unmanageable. So breaking it down, what exactly is all the stress about and which ones can you tackle? I find that really helpful to do with somebody else. Me and my husband sit down and say, right, when I feel overwhelmed, right, what is everything? And which one can we work on? Which one can we do? So I think, again, it's breaking it down as much as possible so you can see a way forward, because when we're overwhelmed, we can't see a way forward. It just seems impossible. There's nothing we can do. So it's about working out what can we do. And that might be involving other people as well, but what can we do to take that next step to manage this overwhelm and just reduce it a bit? And that in itself reduces overwhelm because you can see a way forward.
Yeah, we can see. We've got a few more comments. Holly's Gin. Hi, Holly. Needing to hear this right now, so thank you. I'm glad, Holly, that it's helping. Inglis Bailey, I so need to hear this today, so thank you. Oh, this is so good, Emma, isn't it? When we're able to connect with people here and now, design and draw. This has been brilliant and so helpful. Thank you both. Exactly what I needed to hear. Store for the mind, brilliant tips. Thank you. I'm glad that that's helpful. Something I wanted to ask you about is the G word, the guilt word, because it's a little bit like the imposter syndrome. You know, when I started Not on the High Street, Harry was 3 months old. This January, he's going to be 16 years old. You know, I found myself even this morning, I was doing a story on Instagram and he was leaving for school. And actually on the story, you can hear me go, bye. And he sort of left. And then literally I realized I'd already done an hour's work and I was about to do 3 hours work. And I hadn't even asked him how his homework had gone last night and all this sort of thing. And I literally said to myself, oh my goodness, you are, you know, you're terrible, Holly. What is happening? And I started beating myself up, and there is this thing, isn't there, that guilt follows us women around.
Yeah.
And also, you know, emotional labor. And we, you know, we talk about that, the guilt that, you know, I have about, you know, I want to do some things for the wedding, you know, and, you know, send Frank's mother some nice things, you know, you'd like to think Frank would be doing this, but hey, but that's emotional labor, right? So, you know, that's the thing. So I just wanted to ask, you know, and again, we've only got these moments here together, but guilt, is it something that we can get rid of, or is it going to be with us forever? And if so, how do we tackle those feelings?
I think that's an excellent question. I think guilt is almost like you have a baby and guilt comes along with it, doesn't it? Here comes the guilt fairy, it's coming down just as you have a baby. So I think, you know, you can't necessarily help how you feel. If you feel guilty, you're not, I say, as soon as you start to say, I shouldn't be feeling that way, it's going to come back more. So, but I think we can tackle those feelings. I don't think we'll necessarily get rid of them altogether, because see, we can't necessarily help how we end up feeling on a particular basis. And I think there's a few things from it. Is looking at what's triggering that guilt. Is it, you know, is it realistic? So for example, you're saying about your son going to school today, it's obviously something that's important to you, spending time with your son, it's one of your values. So can we make sure we're living by those values? So we're say, okay, well, I didn't manage to spend time with him this morning, but I'm going to, after school, spend 30 minutes with him, because that's important to me. So it's about making sure that you're living with your values, because obviously that can trigger guilt. But sometimes the guilt comes for, you know, no real reason at all. We just feel guilty because we should be doing it all, or we're comparing ourselves to other people. So it's also thinking, what is the trigger to that guilt? So that trigger that we just talked about was probably one that you could then do something about and hold on to your values and find another way to manage it. Sometimes where maybe it's our inner critic keep reaping in and saying, you should be doing this. Then step back and think, well, actually, should I? Or is my inner critic saying something to me that's making me feel guilty? So for example, you know, mums who think they should be doing something, watch out for shoulds, because they're really important. They're actually a really sinister way, or an insidious way to criticize yourself. Well, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, I should be doing it all, I should be doing everything. But what are shoulds telling you? They're telling you what you shouldn't be doing right now. So keep an eye out for those shoulds. They're not necessarily helpful. Unlike looking at your values, they can be very unhelpful. And why should we be doing it all? Why should we be doing, you know, why should we be the one who's always picking the kids up from school? Why shouldn't other people be doing it? So keep an eye out for those shoulds and look at what else is triggering that guilt. Often comparison. So, you know, we look online or we see a mother who's looking amazing and we think, oh, they're doing everything and I'm not. And social media is so bad for that. We're so bad at looking at a little snapshot of somebody's life and making all these assumptions about it. And then we feel inadequate because we're not doing that. But we have to remember we're making a massively invalid comparison, because when we see that woman in the street, we don't see, you've seen the iceberg drawing, we only see the tip. We're comparing our entire iceberg of how we feel to the tip of their iceberg. And that's an invalid comparison. We can't do it. We're making assumptions and it's not right. So if it's comparisons triggering that guilt, pull it back and remember, we're not comparing our whole life to them. We're making an invalid comparison against a little slice of their pie. And we're making assumptions about ourselves that we're not good enough or they're doing everything, which are just not true. So what's triggering that guilt? And think about whether we can disregard that in some way, or whether we do actually need to do something which helps us live within our values and what's important to us.
Oh gosh, I'm learning so much. And just when you said that, you know, I've got some wedding prep to do tonight, and I instantly I find it sometimes like balancing. So I sort of depleted some of my values this morning, and it doesn't mean now he's sitting there at school thinking what a terrible mother I am. I'm going to just up the scales tonight, and I'm going to do something that makes us connect and tonight. So it's all about, isn't it, that just being aware and just adjusting accordingly. I've got a couple of other comments. Lawlath1, just decided to tune in as I am so overwhelmed with the volume of work I have to do right now and can't see the wood for the trees. So thank you for this. I'm really glad that that's helped. Sarah Shelley Art, the flip side is you're showing Harry how hard you work and how important passion is. And I do agree, Sarah. And you know, and eating month to month with him later it will solve everything.
Absolutely. And we don't have to be perfect all the time. In fact, we need to model that we can make mistakes, and that's okay.
Yes.
Children need modelling of mistakes and how you respond to them. Children don't need perfect parents who get it all right all the time. They need parents who say, oh, I got that a bit wrong. Maybe I should be doing that differently. Yeah. Being able to say, yeah, absolutely. Gem Lettuce Jewelry, I feel so much better when I don't keep comparing myself to others. Well, keep an eye on that. Yeah.
Don't we all? Before we finish off, despite basically understanding the brain better than any of us will ever understand the brain, what have you learned personally during COVID? Have you yourself learned things that you didn't expect to learn? Yeah, I think that's an absolutely excellent question. And I think, well, first of all, I've probably had a very different experience of the pandemic than other people because I've been at work the whole time. Yes. And psychologists are in huge demand in a pandemic, which is probably no surprise. So I've probably had a very different experience of the pandemic all the way through. But I think what I've learned is that less choice is probably better for me. I get quite overwhelmed with choice a lot of the time, and actually it fits with the research on brains and how we work, that actually having less choice and less things we feel we have to do makes us less stressed. I never thought this about myself. I prefer having less choice in many ways and having less. I've not had less to do on a daily basis, but I've had less to choose between of what I need to do on a daily basis. And I think the other thing is, I think we've all learned about the need for community, and I think that's so important because the strongest predictor of nearly everything, of mental well-being and physical well-being, is those social connections we have. Is it? Yeah, absolutely. Social connections is absolutely fundamental, the underpinnings of mental well-being. And you know, things like, for me, for example, I'm going to show you this, getting through a brain hack for my friend. Here we go. That made my day when I was feeling bad. Those social facts, you know what, here we go. Shall I put it on for a second? Please put it on. I love it. There you go. So that would made my day one day. It was just absolutely amazing. So those social connections to me and to everybody are fundamental. There's got to be people who make you feel good, who you value, who hold the same things in high regard as you. They're absolutely key. And I think the other thing that for me was, I'm going to take the brain half off now because I don't feel I could be serious in that. I think Scottish people are quite cynical. That's not necessarily always a bad thing. But some of the tips that go out, I think, oh, right, not sure about that. Gratitude. I thought, gratitude, not sure about that. But actually, being grateful for what we have and what I have during, you know, I was so grateful I have a bit of a garden. I'm so grateful for that. That shifted my focus to my garden. I was so grateful about so many things during the pandemic. Yes, there was lots of stressors. I was very stressed all the time. But gratitude is an absolutely powerful attention focuser on, it shifts your attention from all those things. So I could come home from a difficult day at work. I was so grateful I came home and I could go outside for 10 minutes afterwards. Yeah. So what are we grateful for? And it can seem a little bit kind of mushy, I think, gratitude, but instead of thinking like that, I kind of see it's an attention focuser because our brains are prone to focus on the negative, and it's bringing it back to what actually, what's of value to me here and what's important. Oh, I love those. I think that they're really, really powerful. And so for any, I'm going to summarize you now, and it will make you blush, so I'll let you go. But before you go, I just want to remind everybody, Emma's book's out on Thursday. It's the Toolkit for Modern Life, 53 ways to look after your mind. Follow her. It's absolutely been a pleasure. My goodness. Please, can we talk again in the future? Because I think I'd love to, Holly. I would love to talk, because there's nothing more than I love than delving into this. And I love efficiency. You know, I love efficiency, and I'm sure this community does. You know, what can we do and learn so that we can be less stressed, more happy, achieve more, be more fulfilled, you know, and have a calmer mind. So thank you so much for your time. I will let you go now. There used to be this little cross that I could take people off, but now you need to just, but thank you, bless you. Thank you so much for all your help.
Questions. Thank you very much, Holly. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, well done on your first live.
Thank you.
What have we learned here? Our brains scientifically respond more to negative things, okay? So we need to know that our brain latches on to negativity. We're all human, we all feel things, and we all feel overwhelmed, and we all feel stressed, and we feel that imposter syndrome. As I said this morning, you know, I walked into the office and I really was not in a good mood. I had worked already so hard. I'd already felt like I'd really sort of not been a great mother. I felt that I'm not going to be able to get this wedding under wraps. I can't do this, I can't do that. And that was all that was going on this morning. We need to know that we recognize those feelings, we understand them, but feelings is just what they are. Step back, recognize and externalize negative feelings. So if that feeling or that negativity was, as Emma says, a gremlin or a little, you know, lice or something like that, she has people actually draw out these gremlins, and you stood with yourself, gremlin, and you looked at these two, what would you say? What is that external factor, that the way that you would have looked at it? What advice would you be giving yourself? And that is absolutely, you need to visualize that inner critic and tell them where to go, and recognize and face into your feelings, and do not sweep them under the carpet. Emma has just told us they get bigger under the carpet. They grow, they eat all the dust and the shit that you put under the carpet, and they grow. So no sweeping them under the carpet. Be proactive. I love this, that Emma knows that her book is out this Thursday. So she predicted that this was going to be a cup becoming full. And she has these illustrations in her book about the cup. And when you know that the cup is filling up, what are you going to do proactively that stops you overflowing that cup? And she took 2 weeks off her day job so that she could deal with releasing her book. And I thought that that was really interesting. Do we ever look in our diaries and just sort of red mark weeks that are going to be tough and plan accordingly? I don't. So this is something I am going to take away probably for the rest of my life. And mum guilt. Watch out for the shoulds. I should have done that. I should have been better. I should be at the school gate. I should do drop off. I should be at the sports day. We shouldn't be doing any of it. We should is not a good thing. Focus in on what you do. And gratitude. Emma learned that community and who we surround ourselves with, what we can be grateful for, are two of the most important things that she has pulled out of lockdown. And you know what, that will stay. And choice, having less choice. And I couldn't agree more. How we can, I think we learn it as we get older, simplifying our lives, being grateful for what we actually do have, and surrounding ourselves by radiators and not drains. Look at your circles around you. Is there anyone pulling you down? Is there anyone that you're spending far too much time thinking about negatively? Then potentially you need to deal with something, because actually that's our sort of, that's what fuels us, and so it should fuel us and not drain us. Emma was amazing. First Instagram live, she did pretty well. And that brain hat, she needs to sell those brain hats. She needs a whole line of merchandising. I can't get into product because I go off on one, but I love the brain hat. Do follow Emma, do buy her book. It has been wonderful to see you all. Thank you so much as ever for supporting these. Thank you, Dell, for helping me bring these such crucial conversations to life. Yeah, lots of love. And do look at my Instagram post today. If you haven't been involved in hashtag yes this is my desk, go and check out my Instagram post. Go and nominate someone, take a picture of your desk, get yourself in with your desk. You know, I'd love to see you in your environment. hashtag yes this is my desk, tag me in and nominate someone that you would like to see their desk, and it's all in my copy why I'm doing it. As I said, I left a story this morning where I abandoned Harry going to school, but just do have a look, and I would love to see us all getting involved. For now, lots of love and a big kiss. Mwah.